we've done a couple of talks and interviews like this over the years. The first time we were in the BFI South Bank together was back in 2002. And since then, you've had lovely cameos in films like The Queen, which we saw a clip from earlier today, and The Interpreter, and a cameo role in Inception. So between now and then, what would you say has changed? If you don't mind my saying, you're looking wonderful at age 97. Do things feel different at age 97?
Well, I tell you, Dylan, as on holiday in Malta, I found a postcard which rather sums up my situation at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
It said, everything hurts. Any part that doesn't work. You feel like the night before, but you didn't go out. Your address book is empty. You get winded playing drafts. You need your glasses to find your glasses. The gleam in your eyes are bifocals. Your children are already grandparents. You bite into a steak, and your teeth come out. Yes, the mind is willing, but the flesh is weak. Your back goes out more than you do. But what the hell? Enjoy life anyway.
So we've just had a look at the film The Heart Within.
Right.
Can you tell me any memories particularly about working on that film?
Well, to be honest, I know I did it at Twickenham Studios.
Yep.
But that's most all I can remember. I was saying to Barbara, sitting there, I can't remember any of these scenes.
Really?
Hardly at all. Some I did, yeah. No,
Yep.
I mean, there are a few, but on the whole, I don't remember most of it.
It was
Strange enough.
quite a quick film, I imagine.
Yes, it was
to do.
made on a shoestring, actually.
Yeah.
One of the lesser films, I thought. But strangely enough, people like it. I'm so happy about that.
I think it's quite a warm film, actually. It's got a lot of, it's got a nice sense of humour about
David
it.
Hemmings, it was very good.
That's right, yeah, he's
He
great.
became a very big name, didn't he?
Surely, yes,
Yeah.
he did in the 60s, yeah, certainly. So this morning we spent quite a lot of time looking through your career from your very first film, Pool of London, all the way through up to almost the present day. And I just wanted to ask you, basically, when you came to the UK, you were working as a merchant seaman. And I'd just like to ask, how did you go from merchant seaman into film actor? Where did you get the acting bug from?
Well, as it happened, I arrived in England, as you know, during the war, as you said. And had no special skills, being honest. So the only type of jobs I could do would be dishwashing jobs, kitchen porters, and so on. It's okay, I didn't mind. Life went on, the war was on, who cared? But I met a guy named Harry Crossman who I knew quite well. And he was in a show called Chu Chin Chow. Mm-hmm. And he gave me a ticket to see the show. I went backstage, and I said, Harry, they had 6 black guys in the show. It was a big musical, Chu Chin Chow. There was about 60 in the cast.
Right.
So they would just walk on parts and so on. I said, Harry, can't you get me in the show? He said, no, Earl, it doesn't work like that. I said, I was only kidding, more or less. I wasn't too serious. So I said, okay, I'm only joking, Harry, don't worry about it. But as it happened, about 3 weeks later, he came to me in a club I used to hang out in Wardour Street, which is only 5 minutes in the west end of London, as you know.
Yeah.
So he said, Earl, your big chance has come. I said, what do you mean, Harry? He said, Russell didn't turn up, a guy named Russell. He didn't turn up for the matinee. It's the 3rd time it's missed, so the director said, get somebody else. So he took me to the stage door, and the director was standing outside. He said, he looked me up and down. He said, I guess you'll do, Harry. And believe it or not, within that night I was on stage.
Wow.
He said, take him up to the dressing room, show him what he has to wear, and put him through the ropes and so on. Well, we had about half an hour to do all of that, to be very honest. And because it was the matinee and there was a night show coming up.
Right, yeah.
So I got into my costume and so on. And there was a guy named Abdullah, big guy, who'd come on stage. And he would sing, see the oysters stewed in honey, and lizards from Zanzibar. Dun, 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 dun. I forget the words. Dun, 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 dun. And there are 2 guys here, Abdullah's in the middle, and we come in on the chorus. All for our rich Lord Kasim, oh curse Ali Baba. Well, my mouth is opening, not a word's coming out of my mouth, no sound, anything. My knees are trembling. I'm looking out and seeing all these beautiful faces in the front. And I thought to myself, boy, and sweat pouring down. I said, well, this is hell, but it's better than washing dishes. And this is show business, and this is where I belong. I was straight away initiated into the world of theater.
Fantastic.
Anyhow, and that was my beginning.
Mm-hmm. And so after working in the theatre a little bit, you kind of tried for different roles throughout the 40s and stuff, and then you came to work in your big break on screen was Pool of London.
Right.
Could you say a little bit about
Pool of London?
That? Yeah, sure.
Well, it was, if you say, my very first film. I'd been knocking on the door like most actors. This was about 8 years after I started my career, because I worked in the theater all over the country, as you know, and a play called Deep in the Roots and played in about 60 different repertory theaters. Mm-hmm. So I was well seasoned as a theatrical, if you like.
Yeah.
But like most actors, knocking on the door to try to get into films. Mm-hmm. So I was in a terrible show called 13 Death Street, Harlem. And it was a terrible show, I must admit. I hated it. I hated the part and everything. I was underpaid because when I joined the show, they were losing money. And I phoned up a young lady I knew who worked for a film company. Just a coincidence. So she said, by the way, there's this film called The Werner Welch's Fly that Ely Studios will be doing why don't you phone up Margaret Harper Nelson, who was the casting director,
Yeah.
and see if there's a part in it for you. I said, no, I can't be bothered about all of that. He said, but why not? What have you got to lose? So reluctantly, I phoned up Margaret Harper Nelson, Ealing Studios. She said, well, your name is Earl Cameron? I said, yes. She said, you've seen your picture in Spotlight. And Werner Walters Fly we're not doing until November, but there is something else that's coming up that maybe, so can you phone Bessel Dearden?
Direct.
I'll give you the number. So I phoned him, saw him at about 2:30 that same afternoon.
Wow.
He read I took some clips of it from the theater. He read them and said, well, very good and all of that. And he said, but tell me, Earl, how old are you? Now, he had told me by then quite a lot about the script. So I knew it was a young man, about 26 maybe.
Yeah.
So I was, I said, I'm 26. So he said, you look older. I was 32. I was 32 at the time. So he said, you look older. I said, well, yes, it must be my mustache. I had a mustache, you know.
Yeah.
He said, okay, well, you prepared to shave it off. I said, right now, if you like. However, he didn't believe me about the 26 deal, but still he said, okay, Bill. He said, look, what time do you go to the theater? I was in this terrible show. We were playing at Walthamstow that night. I said, I'll leave home about 5 o'clock. He said, okay, we'll get the script to you. And true enough, the script arrived just before I left home. I got on the bus, saw the script, Johnny, 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 almost every second page. I said, this I've got to get. However, cut it all very short, they arranged for me to have a film test. I went to the studio, had a film test, and he would say, I remember the scene pretty well. It was a scene on London Bridge. And I had been in the theater for 8 years.
Yeah.
So naturally, I was a line. He said, so he said, anyhow, the line meant I was with a girl, was played by Susan Choi eventually, but I was tested with a girl named Carol Marsh. And so I said, yes, something like this happened when I was much younger. I forget the lines. He said, Earl, look, the mic is here. The camera's right here. Bring it down. So I said, yeah, I said, okay, let's have another shot. Yeah, something like this happened. He said, no, Earl, it's too big, too big. I couldn't get it right. And I went back home that evening. I thought, this is crazy. I could have got this part. And I thought, that's it. And but 3 days later, I phoned up and said, Earl, can you come back to the studio and we'll try with another girl and so on. Yeah. Well, I had a second chance. Went back to the studio, true enough, Ealing Studios, and still I didn't get it right. I couldn't bring it down after 8 years in the theater. You get projected, like I'm projecting now.
Yeah.
So I just couldn't get it to that point. But as it happened, after the third girl, I rehearsed with. They called me back again. He said, we can't decide on you, Earl, because we have another actor coming from New York named Earl Hyman. Two Earls, Earl Hyman, and we'll be testing, but anyhow, do you mind coming to the studio? We'll pay you for it. I said, yes, I happily. Well, but the third time I had it right. Yeah. Something like this happened the first time I met Danny. Nice and quiet. That's it. You got it. And from that moment on, I became a film actor.
Fantastic.
It's
The films that we've shown today, the Heart Within, but we're also showing Pool of London in the next week, and also Sapphire. They're very much part of our season of films looking at London on film. And I just want to ask you about your roles in those films, and they're very much films that look at the issues of race that were happening in the UK at the time during the 50s and 60s. Sometimes successfully, sometimes perhaps not so successfully. But I just wanted to ask you, do you think the films that you were in, do they resonate with you? Do you think they reflect how London was at that time?
Oh yes, especially Pool of London, very much so, very much so. It was a very good film, actually.
Yeah.
And yeah, London was just about, I think, most of the things I did. There were times when I turned down a few parts.
Yeah.
Not a lot. Or there were other times when I would say to the director, look, this is script, I changed it a bit, and so on. But yes, I think most things I've done have been pretty true to life.
Yeah.
At that period, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I can't say I met with any racial prejudice in the films or theater. No, I can't say that. But what I could say that when I first went to Ely Studios and most of the film studios, there were hardly any black technicians at all. Now it's very, very different, but at that time, it didn't matter to me, really. But most of the atmosphere was very, very white, if you like. But it's not important. At least it didn't bother me. I never thought about it, really. It was a way of life in England at that time. So, no, I didn't meet with any racial prejudice at all in the studio or in films, theater, anywhere. Now, I haven't said that, just to get it clear. When I first came to England in 1939, I met with an awful lot of prejudice, mainly in getting a job. But I won't go into all of that because that's not what we're here for. So I'll leave that to itself. But I don't want to say that I haven't met with prejudice. I had doors slammed in my face when I was on tour and all of that. Fair enough, but that's neither here nor there. It hasn't left any scars on me. I years ago, when I was a pretty big name in films and doing very well, I was encouraged to go to Hollywood. But at the time, I had, 4, then 5 children, started from 1, 2, 3, gradually with 5. And I said no, for not the same reasons as now, but because of the racial prejudice in California, especially at that time, and in films. Sidney Poitier, who was a very, very good friend of mine, remembers that when he first went to Hollywood, the only black person he saw in the studios was a shoeshine boy. So California was a very racist part of the world. And I couldn't see how I could possibly fit in with my 5 children. I wouldn't leave without them. My wife, who was white and Jewish, how are we going to fit in those sort of racist attitudes? So I didn't bother. Thank God. Because if I had, I wouldn't be sitting here now. I know that. It would have ruined me as a human being. I'm sorry to say it like this. I hope I'm not offending all you film fans. But let's be honest. Hemmings, of course, as you say, became a very, very big name and a wonderful young boy at the age of 12 then. And we got on extremely well. Yes, he was a delight to work with. And James Haight, I remember also, because he was a very funny guy. He was more of a comedian than a straight actor. And always just before a take, he'd tell me some joke. I thought, is it doing this deliberately to put me off my lines? But he was that way. He was a very funny guy, deep down, but a hell of a nice man, a very nice man. And yes, I remember James Haight extremely well. FESTAC 77 was African black, if you like, festival from all over the parts of the Caribbean, 14 zones in Africa. Yeah, I think, yes, South Africa, North Africa, Southern Africa, East Africa, and so on. And it brought people from all over the world. And I thank the Nigerian government for putting this on. In fact, to be very honest, how I became the chairman of the UK zone. And I remember quite well, I went to the first meeting, and we had a meeting at the Nigerian house, and they elected a young man, quite a nice guy, Ian Hall as the chairman. Chief Anahu was responsible for the Nigerian part of it, and he said, well, I have in mind, we all met and have in mind somebody who could be chairman of the UK zone. So we accepted that. And I went down to Nigeria for the first time and came back. And I thought, okay, I don't mind being a part of this. Then we had the second meeting, but I found that there was a lot of people were rather disgruntled by the situation. And then I remember driving to the Nigerian house. This is in Kensington Palace Garden. Sitting in my car for about half an hour thinking, shall I go to the second meeting? Because everybody was so disgruntled about it. And I thought, no, I don't want to get involved in this anymore. But I sat there and I thought, well, also it came to me that at that same night, it was on a Thursday, I remember, there was a meeting at the Baha'i Center. And I thought, shall I go to the Baha'i Center or shall I go to this meeting? And I couldn't make up my mind. So I thought, well, this is a racial thing. This is very close to me. So is the Baha'i faith, mind you. A different sort of situation. So I chose to go to the Nigerian meeting, and all the majority of black artists from out of London and England around were there, maybe about 50 people. And what they were saying, that it was unfair that Ian Hall should be chosen as the chairman and not elected as the chairman. So that was why they were so disgruntled about it. So I said, okay, well, I'll go along with the crowd. And then so Chief Anahu said, well, if it's okay with you, if that's what you want, okay, let's elect somebody here now. Unfortunately, they elected me. I said, now, this is what I didn't want. So Chief Anahu said, look, it'll be just about 9 months out of your life. surely you're prepared to make that sacrifice. I said, fair enough. Well, being honest, 9 months turned into about 3.5 years. Because after about 4 or 5 months of having an office in Kingsway, and I'm the chairman, not knowing what the hell I'm doing. I mean, I had no experience in this type of thing, of running an office. However, then they had a coup d'etat in Nigeria. General Gowon, who was the president, was, how would you say, got rid of anyhow.
Yeah.
And they elected a man named Murtala Muhammad as the president. This man, another year or so. And Murtala Muhammad took over, then maybe he was a very go-ahead sort of man. I met all these presidents during that period. He was very go-ahead sort of man, ready to take Nigeria into the next world, but he was a strong communist. Good or bad, I'm not going to get into politics here, but he was assassinated. To be very honest, it was believed that he was assassinated by the CIA. Now, I'm not getting into this. I don't know. But he was assassinated, Murtala Muhammad. So, it meant another year or so, they had to elect another president. This is all history, if you might know. So it went on for 3.5 years. I was connected to this thing. I don't know how I got into it, but there you are. I kept up the politics. I didn't get involved with any of that, strange enough. I got on very well with Chief Naharo and most of the, then he was also dropped and they took on another president of the thing. Mind you, it was a wonderful situation going on in Nigeria. I went down there about 6 or 7 times over that period. And I'd meet all the people from the different zones of the world, of the black world, if you like, and from all over Africa. So it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And the festivals eventually took place. It was a fantastic situation. But unfortunately, the Western press chose not to take any notice of it. That was a pity, because it was a wonderful, wonderful situation. I enjoyed it very much. And I certainly didn't regret being chairman of the UK zone for that period.